Hey guys, we are going to work an example for matrices and systems of equations. And for sake of time, I've just went ahead and written it down as a matrix. So the first thing I need to look at is the first column. They need to be in ascending order, meaning from smaller to larger, and they need to be multiples. And these are multiples of 1. So 1, 2, and 3. So my matrix is set up to where I can now do my work. And then the other thing that I need to make sure of, or to highlight, is that what I want to do is create my matrix. This is what I'm looking for. And then I can have numbers and everything else over here, but I'm wanting that 1, 1, 1 and those zeros there. And that's what I'm working for. So the first thing that I want to be able to do is, since I have a 1 here, and what I'll do, I'm going to erase that in pencil now, and I'm going to put a red 1. I have that accomplished just from what they gave me. I'm going to make these become zeros. I'm going to do it in one step. What I'm going to say is that I'm going to multiply row 1 by a negative 2, and I'm going to add it to row 2. Again, this does not change row 1. This is just getting the math for row 2 to where it's canceled out. And then what I will also do on this step is I will say row 1 times the negative 3 plus row 3. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'll take care of row 1, and I'm going to actually do my work out here to the bottom, so that way I'm not having to think it through. I'm going to multiply negative 2 by the terms in, the entries in, or the elements in row 1. It becomes a negative 2, a negative 4, 6, and a negative 18. And that's 2, negative 1, 2, negative 8. This, I have to add them together, and that's going to give me my new row 2. So 0, negative 5, 8, negative 26. So row 1 didn't change from what I'm doing. I was doing that to change row 2. So 1, 2, negative 3, 9. And in row 2, there's my 0. I needed that. Negative 5, 8, negative 26. Now I'm going to do it for multiply row 1 by a negative 3 and then add it to row 3. So I get a negative 3, a negative 6, a 9, and a negative 27. And then row 3's values 3, negative 1, negative 4, 3. And I'm going to add them together. Sorry, I should put a plus on there. 0, negative 7, 5, negative 24. So there we go. I have my zeros there in place. 0, negative 7, 5, negative 24. Now I'm going to turn my negative 5 into a 1. That's what I want next. So I'm going to simply say a negative 1/5 times R2. One, 2, negative 3, 9, 1, negative 8/5, and 26/5. And I did not do anything to row 3, so negative 7, 5, negative 24. So now I can use row 2 to change row 3. I want to make this right here become a 0. So what I will say is 7 times row 2, and I'm going to add it to row 3. Once I get this to be a 0, then I can make that a 1. So I'm going to multiply row 2 by 7, so that is 0, 7, negative 56 fifths, and 42, 180, 182, 182 fifths. And that's 0, negative 7. I'll just write it 5, negative 24. 0, 0. Alright, so 5 becomes 25 fifths, and a negative 24. 24 times 5. That becomes a negative 120 fifths. So negative 31 fifths and 62 fifths. 1, 2, negative 3, 9, 0, 1, negative 8 fifths, 26 fifths, and then here's my answer down here, 0, 0, a negative 31 fifths, 62 fifths. One more step. I need to turn that into a 1. So I say a negative 5/31 times R3. And that becomes a negative 2. I've used Gaussian elimination, and now I can rewrite this. This is x plus 2y minus 3z equals 9. This is y minus 8 fifths z equals 26 fifths. And this is z equals a negative 2. I take z, I plug it in here. So I end up with y minus 8 fifths times a negative 2 equals 26 fifths. That is that negative 2 being plugged into where z is in this equation. And then I solve. I end up with y plus 16 fifths equals 26 fifths. And then subtract, and I end up with 10 over 5, so y equals 2. So I have the values for y and for z. I take both of those and I plug them into the very first equation. So I have x plus 2 times 2 minus 3 times the negative 2 equals 9. That becomes 4. That becomes 6. So a negative 2 plus, that's a positive, sorry, so that's a plus 6, so that's 10. So plus 10, sorry, equals 9, and then x equals a negative 1. There we go. I need to write out my solution. Negative 1, 2, negative 2. This is my x, this is my y, this is z. Again, with this, I want to point out that this is the part that that gets people hung up is that I am not changing row 1. I'm using row 1 to help change row 2. So I say I'm going to change row 2, making that uh, entry in the second spot of the column first entry of the row 2. I want to change that to 0. So I'm going to change row 2 by adding to it a -2 times row 1. But that doesn't change row 1. That's the hardest part. People will turn around and want to rewrite row 1 with that. It's counterproductive. You're caught in a loop. So once you have a 1 established and a 0 or 1, they don't change whenever you're doing this. All you're doing is changing that row you're adding it to. So I changed row 2 here and row 3 here. Again, I do my work over to the side. You can use a separate piece of paper to do it, but I do my work over to the side. Please don't try to do all this mentally. And it does take some paper, some space whenever you work these problems. The other aspect to point out is that I want to get my 1 and some zeros, and then I want to make this turn into a 1 and get a 0, and then make this turn into a 1. Follow it in that order, because if you try to just go through and make all 1s, these are going to build back up on you. You need to follow it in that order. Make some 1s, get the zeros underneath it, make a 1, zeros underneath it. And if you can do it in multiple steps, do it in multiple steps. For instance, this one here, I did it in 1 step. You can even do it in to where you combine a couple of steps at once, and it takes less time, but you have to be able to see it. If you don't see it, don't worry about doing 1 step at a time. You could have done this in just 1 step, turn around and done this one in the next step. 1 step at a time. Okay guys, watch the publisher's videos, critically think and structure your homework, and good luck on the remaining homework problems.